here I am, a fighter pilot, and I'm talking about being terrified and having fear. This was not something I admitted or talked about at all for years.
Hi, everyone. I am joined by our very own heroic grad alum, keynote speaker, and author of the acclaimed book, Flying in the Face of Fear, A Fighter Pilot's Lessons on Leading with Courage, Kim Campbell. It's so great to be with you, and I am excited to dive into the book and into your journey in writing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having the conversation.
There's a concept in your book that I absolutely love, this idea of falling forward. And your book really centers around courage, around resiliency, and ultimately leadership under pressure. And I wanted to know, what does that idea of falling forward mean to you personally, and how did that idea shape your story?
Yeah. I refer to it as failing forward, which I think is kind of similar to falling forward. But I think, to me, it's this idea that, and this is something that's been over time, right? It's not something that I got right away. But the idea is that we are going to make mistakes and fail on our journey. And the way that we get better is to learn from them and to grow and improve each time. And it's really something that I learned throughout my journey as a fighter pilot, because as much as I wanted to be perfect, right, this drive for perfection, it wasn't a reality. And so I quickly learned that if I was going to not crumble under the pressure, I needed to just give myself a little bit of grace, know that I was going to make mistakes, know that I was going to fail. And so failing forward is all about failing, making mistakes, and then learning from it. And that means we have to be able to let those mistakes and failures go, which I can find really difficult. And I've been known to beat myself up over mistakes and failures, but it's so much more productive when we can learn from it, let it go, move on, and then just do it better the next time.
I love that. And I'm sure it's very applicable to that creative process that goes into writing of the book itself. I'd be really curious, how did that lesson resonate with you as you're going through the creative process of writing the book, and how did that impact you as an author?
Yeah, I think it's this idea of constant iteration, right? Once the book is out there, it feels very vulnerable and it's nerve-wracking. And there was that part of me that wanted the book to be perfect. And I realized that it wasn't, there's probably an error in there. There's probably a typo. There's probably, as much as we try it, as much as we have all the people to look at it, but the process along the way of iterating and continuing to get it better. And, I remember handing the manuscript over to an editor for the first time. And I was so nervous, but I was also really excited to get the feedback. I think there was part of me that knew that I needed some help to make it better. So,
Mm.
it's just knowing that it's never going to be quite perfect. There's going to be ups and downs on the journey. And, I think all of those things, I use them in my everyday life, just in terms of that idea of failing forward. And I
Mm.
use it in the book, and I use it as a keynote speaker as well. Just trying to get better every time, to grow and iterate. Every time I give a speech, every time I write an article, like, I'll look back sometimes and go, well, that part wasn't the best. And it's just like, well, what are you
Sure.
going to do about it now? It's out of your control. Now you just learn from it and do it better the next time.
Yeah, that idea of, first of all, being in the moment and not living in the past, and having that kind of, well, would have, should have, could have, and across its various pieces, but also being able to take that lesson with you is so important. I love that. And when you think about higher stakes decisions, high stakes moments where the pressure might be up there for you, where it might feel like this is kind of a make or break moment, what do you do internally? What dialogue do you have with yourself to help you embrace that moment and be present and embrace the risk rather than kind of retreating back from that?
Yeah, I have learned a few things along the way with that. I think I've faced a lot of really high pressure moments throughout my career in the Air Force, and even beyond, whether it was flying airplanes or in leadership roles. And the one thing that I learned, I go back to some of my initial flying training. And there was a moment where I was air refueling, so getting gas from another airplane in flight, on a combat mission on my way from Kuwait to Afghanistan, my very first combat sortie, which is a flight. And
Mm.
we had to refuel multiple times. And I remember the first time thinking, like, I can't mess this up. Like, if I can't get gas, if I can't connect with this airplane, I'm going to have to divert. And
Mm.
that means that the mission doesn't get done. Um, so there's a lot of pressure, but it turns out when you're like under pressure and under stress, and of course, for me, what's my response? I have this like death grip on the stick, trying to fly the airplane, trying to rejoin with this airplane in front of us. And we're going probably 250 miles per hour. And my flight lead, my wingman that's next to me, he knows it. He can sense it. And he just quietly says over the radio, KC, that's my call sign. He says, just wiggle your fingers and toes. And it was just like, it was his way of saying, just relax, like just relax. And the truth is you will control the airplane much better if you have a relaxed grip on the stick. But that moment stuck with me in so many things that I do. And now when I feel that kind of that stress and the nervousness, which is every time I get up to speak, I remind myself, just relax, right? Wiggle your fingers and toes. I've also learned the breathing techniques, which are especially helpful when you're not in a backstage and you're kind of with the audience before you go up, just to be able
Yeah.
to breathe and relax. And then I tell myself to relax, be in the moment, and just share the story with them. That is something I learned through my time at Heroic, was being in the moment, being present, just like relax and have fun. And that has helped me probably more than anything, just being
Mm.
relaxed, but just kind of at this point, everything that you've done up to this point, like I'm a big believer, you got to put in the work. But when you get to that moment, like you can't really prepare anymore. It's what's done
Right.
is done. So just relax, have fun, be in the moment.
I love that. And I like that you have a touchstone, a moment or an act or a practice that you have incorporated into your psyche and kind of your process, so to speak, that you can go back to. I think that's so smart, and something that finding that moment for yourself is really, really critical. So I'm moving my fingers and my toes just to preemptively stay relaxed. So it's what I could take with me there. You know, beyond that experience that you had, flying that sortie, and when you're outside of those combat scenarios and kind of civilian life scenarios, when has embracing that uncertainty led to an unexpected breakthrough that you didn't even know could potentially happen and might not have if you weren't able to embrace that moment?
Yeah, I mean, the first one that comes to mind, there's a few, but I think one of them was just writing the book and putting it out
Mm.
there. I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty. Like I just started writing the book. I didn't follow any good process. Like I wish I had people that could help me with the process in advance. I just started writing, which was an incredible experience. It just took me a really long time, but I
Right.
just started writing without the big idea. But it was a really great experience. It just meant that it took me much longer to write the book. Once I
Sure.
refined the big idea, which actually came from creating my keynote, which then
Mm.
helped me refine the book. But that process of just writing and not knowing, like, it's the nervousness of like, am I going to make a difference? Am I really going to connect with people on this? Is it worth all this trial and error and trouble and fear and stress and doubt that I have? I mean, it took me 4 years to write the book.
Mm.
Publishing it is a whole other journey. And there was a period of time I looked at my husband and I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to have the courage to publish this thing. Like, I feel really good about the book, but it's
Mm.
so nerve-wracking to put it out there. And he kind of laughed because he was like, this is what your book is about. It is about taking a leap of faith. It's about being
Yeah.
afraid and doing it anyway, right? It's the uncertainty, the fear, the stress that comes with it. And then all of a sudden it's out there and you're like, what did I do? Like,
Mm.
very vulnerable, very personal in many ways. But the other side of that, right now, where I'm at now, and the book's been out for a few years, is just the incredible connections that I have made with people through this book, whether it's, young leaders, young people starting out on their journey,
Mm.
people that have facing something really difficult in their life and kind of embarrassed that they feel afraid about it. Just the amazing connections and people that will share with me that something they read or something I said, they may have heard it, in a different way before, but I said it in some way that connected with them. And to me, that's
Mm.
what it's all about. It's very similar to speaking, right? When you have that moment where you make a connection with something, it makes all the fear, the doubt, the uncertainty, the stress, it
Yeah.
makes it worth it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Seeing that light bulb moment for people is such a cool experience, and I want to key in on a comment that you made of how the book came from your keynote, came from that process. Can you tell me a little bit more about where were you at in your speaking process, building that keynote, performing, and when that idea kind of hit you and how you pursued that and kind of the interplay and the timeline between those? I think that'll be really interesting for people.
Yeah, I have to try to put all the timing together, but I think
Sure.
during my time in grad when I was working on my keynote, um, which is really at the same time that I was working on the book. Like the book was always just kind of in the background. I was writing,
Mm.
I was, getting thoughts, going through old, letters and things like that. I think, it was writing, but there was no structure to it. It was more like chronological. That's all it was, with no real lessons. And at the same time, I, was working on my keynote in grad with Jen Singer, was my writing coach.
Mm.
And as we're working on some of the things that I wanted to include, some of the things that were really important to me, I just kept saying, but I don't know how they fit together.
Mm.
And I think there was just this light bulb moment with her. And she's like, Kim, of course they fit together. And she kind of just walked me through from somebody who wasn't so close to it to go, here's how I
Right.
see it fit together. And I was like, yeah, that totally makes a ton of sense. And so as I continued to build out the keynote, and I just had this manuscript that was not much shape and structure, it just helped me like start pulling the pieces all together. And it really helped me refine like what my big idea was, certainly for the keynote, but also it helped me kind of piece together this big idea for the book and then building the structure out. So, it was a concurrent process. And I believe me, I do not think that I wrote the book in the right way, like the most expeditious way, probably the most efficient way. Um, but it worked for me. It was, I don't know
Yeah.
that I would do it that way again. But sometimes things happen for a reason.
Yeah, no, I think that you found a path that could work. And there's a phrase that I love, harkening back to people not being as close to it, potentially having a third party or an objective use. I don't
Yes.
know who discovered water, but it wasn't a fish, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just so important when we're so invested and have been working on something for a prolonged period of time. Getting that objective perspective from someone can be so helpful, whether it's someone in our lives, spouses, children, family members, friends, different experts that can work on things. It's so helpful. And you parlayed me very nicely into what would you do differently if you're going back. We're writing book number two, and maybe you want to do the same process. Maybe you might want to change some things. What would you think about in approaching it differently this time, and what would you wish you would have done that first time?
I think what I would do differently would be to likely start with what my big idea is, who my
Mm.
audience is, and then kind of build a structure. I feel like probably would have been more effective. Like I have a file, I think it's called Cutting Room Floor, from my book, and there is so much in there, which is great for, social media or other ideas, potentially a second book. But there were probably months of time that I wrote things that had no relevance to the book. So I think that's what I would do. I think having more of a structure and a process, um, probably more of an accountability team or partner as
Mm.
well, just to kind of keep me on track. That's, I think, the beauty of kind of like the way heroic works in terms of the speaking and having different kind of deadlines and keeps you on your game and gives you feedback along the way. Um, I didn't have a ton of feedback on my book initially. I had kind of one person reading it, which was great. And I really because I didn't want to be like, here's this giant pile that really has no structure or format. I'm not going to just,
Yeah.
it's a lot to ask of people, like especially if you're asking a friend, it's, obviously a little different if you're paying an editor to do that. But I think, having more of a structure, more of a process, I'm big into process, and I had no process on that book, which is just kind of
Right.
funny. It goes against a lot of the things that I normally do, but I will tell you, there was something meaningful for me because my story had some kind of I would say some very personal moments and life changing moments,
Mm.
life defining moments in it. It was very good to just put it all out there and
Yeah.
remember it and kind of relive it. And even though it didn't all make it into the book, for me, it opened up my eyes to a lot of things that I hadn't reflected on before.
This idea of having this cutting room floor, I think it's very easy, especially for high achievers, which I think it's fair to say you fall into the camp of high achievers, to want to only put this finished, polished product out into the world. So the idea of having this cutting floor where you've put kind of everything out there, whether it's going to make it to the end result or not, it's kind of scary for some people. How did you navigate that and come to terms with yourself of, hey, I'm putting the ideas out there. Maybe it'll make it in, maybe it won't be, but I want to toy with and work through these different ideas and these different experiences that I have.
I think if you don't toy with them, if you don't put them on paper, if you don't speak them out loud, you don't really know where it's going to go, right? Like
Mm.
that one little story, that one little moment, like until like you can, like you might have it in your mind, but until you kind of flesh it out a little bit, I think you don't really know where it might take you. And so it was kind of fun to just go through some of those things. And really what I came down to at the end, as I read through my book, was, is this in benefit of the audience? Will this
Mm.
piece here, is it in line with the big idea? Does it benefit the audience, or is it one of those little stories that I love that I just want to throw in there
Sure.
anyway? But did I get it all right? No, I probably included stuff that I probably could have left out. And there are some things, like from feedback from readers, they're like, I wish you would have included this. And I'm like, no,
Mm.
okay, nothing I can do about it now.
Sure.
It goes back to that debrief, the failing forward. And not that those are necessarily failures, those are really differences of opinion more than anything. But it's a
Sure.
little bit of like, okay, well, that's good to know. I can't do anything
Yeah.
about it, but I do enjoy the feedback process. I do enjoy that. I think if we don't put it out there, I think sometimes you don't quite know what you'll get. And side comment to this is, I found that putting ideas out on LinkedIn was a great way for me to like try something out. I like
Mm.
had this little section, and I'd write it up as a LinkedIn post. And sometimes people would be like, that's interesting, but you kind of missed these three things, or that really
Really?
resonated, or it didn't. And it's just, it's people's opinions. And sometimes, you have to kind of weigh who the opinions are
Sure.
coming from. But I found it like a fun process to try some things out, like a low risk way to try some things out.
Yeah, I think that's such a smart way to create tighter iteration loops and get that feedback because I'd love to get your thoughts on so many people ask, should I write the speech or should I write the book first? Like an ordering conversation. And your instance is that this kind of came out of your keynote. If you had anyone ask you, what would you typically say if they're considering writing the speech or writing the book? How would you think about that?
Um, that's a good question. I feel like the way that I did it worked for me. I feel like with writing the keynote, because it's so short compared to a book, it really got me to really think about what my big idea was, what I wanted to convey to an audience, like the benefits of the idea, the consequences of the idea,
Mm,
that whole process, I think really helped shape the longer book.
right.
That being said, I will also say that the book has also shaped my keynote, because my keynote has now evolved
Right.
since the first iteration pretty significantly. Um, to the point now where I have a contextual model in my keynote that's not in the book because it's just evolved over time. I don't know that there's a right way. It's a way that's like, where are you at in your life? What feels right to you? Can you do them concurrently? Yeah, it's a lot of work. Depends how much time
Sure.
you have. Um, I guess, I mean, I default to the way that I did it because it worked for me, which
Yeah.
is to focus on the keynote first and really get that down and then create the book. I will tell you that having a book and the keynote obviously has been really impactful for clients. They love to see the book. It's been
Mm.
a great part of being a keynote speaker to have the book, to sign the book at events. It's for me, I actually love after the keynote to do a book signing because then it's
Yeah.
all the interaction as well. So that's a long way to say I don't know how to answer your question other than it worked for me. I don't, but I think everybody has their own way of doing things. But I really like the idea of really refining your message, knowing who your
Yeah.
audience is, and then that can parlay into a broader, bigger book.
I think that makes so much sense, and something that I really advocate for is getting your product to market and getting feedback from the real world, which, as you've experienced with your book firsthand, once it's out in the world, it's crystallized. Unless you release a new edition, there's really not rewrites that will take place. Whereas with the speech, you will continue to evolve it. I would imagine even going forward from where it is now, I'm sure it's in a wonderful polished state, but it's a living thing. It will continue to evolve, and by having speaking engagements, you're able to get feedback, iterate, have another speaking engagement, iterate, and so on. So I think that you very naturally fell into, I think, a really smart way of approaching that process. And then once it's polished,
Yeah.
then you can consider the book, right?
Yeah. And I think if I had even waited a little bit longer to write the book, um, the the book would have evolved even more from the keynote because of
Yeah.
the contextual model, the constant iteration of the keynote speech. And you're right, I can't go back and change the book now, but again, I'm a big believer in focus on the things you can control.
Yes.
And to me, like I'm very happy with the book, but you're right. I think there is something to be said about, well, it's the constant iteration. But at the same
Yeah.
time, let me say also that like it's back to the perfection idea. Like it's never going to
Yeah.
be perfect. At some point, you just got to get it out there and then learn the lessons along the way. It's kind of like waiting for your keynote to be perfect. Well,
Right.
you'll wait forever. So you might as well get on that, the first pro bono stage or whatever it is and get the repetitions in. Put in the work, but get the repetitions in.
Right. Yeah, I could not agree more. And you mentioned a really interesting comment that I want to drill in on. So you mentioned the impact that having this book has had as you've worked with event planners, as you have changed and iterated how you approach your speaking career. I'd love to dive a bit more in. How do you approach event planners? How has that changed the way that you communicate your messaging? How do you think about packaging that? Just tell me more about how having that book has impacted your speaking.
Yeah, I mean, it will. When it's a great marketing tool to have the book out there, and for me, I include 100 copies of my book with every keynote. Let me rephrase that. In my keynote fee, my full fee for a
Right.
full keynote, I include 100 copies of my book. I think it gives some negotiating power there in terms of fee range. But I include the 100 copies of my book, and I have found that sometimes if there are 200 guests at the event, if there are 300 members in the audience, that a lot of times, because I'm already providing with the hundred copies, then they will then go on and order an
Right.
additional couple hundred copies, which is great, obviously. But I think the thing that I love the most is that I love the interaction with the audience afterwards. And so I offer a book signing as part of my keynote fee as well, so that after I speak, whether it's a lunch or sometime afterwards, it gives me the opportunity to have that interaction with people, which is a great opportunity for potential referrals and stage side leads as well, because you really get
Yeah.
that one-on-one interaction. Um, but I personally just love the connection, to be able to get off a stage and have conversations with people. It's been really a lot of fun for me. And then the other thing that I have been doing also as part of that keynote fee is offering a book club discussion, maybe a
Mm,
month or two after my keynote with a company, just as an opportunity to reconnect, kind of find out how things are going. They've now heard the keynote, they've read some of the book. How can they apply it? And I find that helps a lot of companies specifically. One, they feel more connected with you and they feel like you're more of a partner, not just get up on the stage and leave. It's more of a,
yeah.
hey, I'm with you on this journey. What other help can I provide? So that's been fun too. I just think there's a lot of opportunities out there to really connect and make that connection for more of a long-term partnership.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. And you're absolutely right. Those human connections are what makes all of this happen, right? That's we're all people at the end of the day, and having the ability to connect to another person is personally rewarding, but it's also just smart business, frankly, from every perspective. And being that kind of full human in your work is something that I have heard time and time again from authors and from speakers is something that resonates with their audience, but it's this catch 22 where sharing that vulnerability and sharing that maybe moment of failure and failing forward, or that moment that was really difficult or really personal, it's scary to do and it's hard to do and it's hard to put that into your work. And how did you approach that? What was the thought process that you went through as you included those moments?
Yeah, I think I realized that it kind of goes back to the people that helped me on my journey and how willing they were to share some things. It's really hard to put it out there when you're like, I failed at this. This did not go well. But I think that makes you more human. It makes you more relatable. I think sometimes we see these amazing bios of people and amazing things that they've done, but what's behind the bio? What's
Mm,
underneath? Where are the failures and mistakes? Because for me, I realized that those were the moments where I learned the most. Those were the moments that I learned the most about myself, where I improved, whether it was as a pilot, a leader, a speaker. They're hard, they're uncomfortable, but I think if we put it out there and we share with others, I think that's, that's the whole point, right? I guess for me,
yeah.
it's helping others on their journey. So if I don't share maybe the not so good stuff, the failures, I think it makes it harder to relate and connect. I mean, there was a moment in my um, speaking process during grad um, where I was in the middle of a master class with Michael Port, and I kind of just told the story of my airplane getting hit. But it's the moment of I guess I should expand on that. It's my airplane getting
Yeah.
hit with a surface-to-air missile over Baghdad. This is a long story that I'm
Oh
going to
my
try to compress,
gosh.
but it's the story of my airplane getting hit with a surface-to-air missile over Baghdad, and it's the really kind of moment where everything comes together and I'm landing the airplane and I'm terrified and, just how I'm feeling in that moment. But I just kind of told the story almost like I was telling somebody else's story. And Michael just looked at me for a moment and was like, "Can you relive that for me?" And it was that was that moment of fear. It was a virtual masterclass during COVID, but I was like, well, what if people see my emotion? What if people see like the fear that I felt? Like, it's putting it out there. And I did that. I relived the moment, and it was so powerful in so many ways. And I got very emotional, and I was like, how the hell am I ever going to do that on a stage in front of people? He's like, because you just did it. Like, you just did it. You did it right in front of us. And now that you've done it, and the more that you rehearse, the more that you kind of go through that vulnerability, that putting it out there, that letting people see you for who you are, like that connects with the audience.
Mm,
That is in the benefit for the audience. It's uncomfortable for me. I relive it every time I do it. I think it's giving ourselves that grace. Like, it's okay. It's okay to be
yeah.
fully in the moment, to be, have some of this, to have the emotions come through because it's true, it's authentic. And I think that really opened up my eyes to like, it's okay to be in the moment. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to, because it connects with people. It's for the benefit of the
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah. I don't know in your own personal life if you've experienced this, but I have time and again where I had this built in my head that if I share this thing or if I talk about this difficult topic, here are the myriad of bad things that could potentially happen in the ways the situation can play out. And it has never played out that way. like time
Yeah.
and time again, people have met my own humanity with their humanity, and it's been ironically one of the more rewarding times that I've had in bringing those vulnerabilities. And it sounds like you've had very similar experiences where when you've taken that risk and taken that leap, it's been very heartwarming and surprising how accepting and empathetic people are to that.
Yes. I think I was nervous about what people would think. I mean, here I am, a fighter pilot, and I'm talking about being terrified and having fear. I'm a woman, and I think there was that fear of judgment of, you know, well, she's not qualified or capable to do this job then,
Yeah.
And it took me a long time. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, this was not something I admitted or talked about at all for years. But to be able now to stand on a stage in front of people and say, yes, I'm a fighter pilot, I'm a woman, I'm standing here in front of you to tell you that I was terrified in this moment. But this is the whole point, right? It's what we do when we
Yeah.
are afraid. And to have people like, it's almost like you give people permission, not that they need it, to like feel okay about that. And has anybody ever come up to me to say like, I don't belong in that career field? No, not once. And if, what, quite honestly, if they think it, whatever, I've kind of come to the point that those aren't necessarily the people that matter anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that the worst critics we often have sit on our shoulder and kind of whisper into our ear all the time, and both those critics and the critics in the real world, I just don't think giving them the time is necessarily healthful or helpful, frankly. So
Yeah.
I think you're spot on for that.
Well, and we do it right because I remember a specific keynote, and I'm going through all of this, and I see this guy in the audience, and he just has this look on his face, like, "Who the hell is she? Like, why am I continuing to sit here?" And it's kind of that thing, you got to block them out, like, just that's focus on what you're doing. And afterwards, there was a cocktail hour that followed, and he came up afterwards and was like, "That was so amazing. I was so in my head about different things in my own
Sure.
life." And I was like, that's what they tell us. Don't critique yourself,
Yeah.
not in that moment anyway. So, but we're human.
Yeah. Well, I'd be curious how, as you went through the process of writing the book, how did that impact your own perception of your leadership, your own perception of embracing risk and fear? You know, sometimes I've heard that in the writing process, this deep lens and work on parts of our own lives and ideas and concepts that we've been working on change who we are as a person. And I'd be curious, was that the case for you? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think, when you put it on paper and you have the time to reflect on it. And for me, my big thing was pulling the lessons out of it.
Right.
Um, so in the moment when some of those things happened, I probably didn't have as many of those lessons. They just feel, you know, uh, not very fun. In the moment when you're facing kind of hard things or failures, you chalk it up. You're like, okay, do it better, whatever. But I really took the time to reflect while I was writing. I really took the time to really think through these things and like, why am I sharing this story in this book? What is the point? And what are the lessons that other people can pull, especially for me from a military background, a fighter pilot? Like, I get it. My target audience is not military fighter pilots. And
Yeah.
so how do I really translate this to why it matters for someone else, why it makes a difference for somebody else? So it really caused me to focus on those things and really think through them. So it was really a reflective experience for me and really being able to pull some of those things through. And I have a section at the end of each chapter that really is it's considerations for leaders. And it was really the bottom line, the point. And that was the section that was hardest for me to write. I didn't want to come across that this was the answer. These were just considerations. And I had a great editor who had me pull all of the things out from the book, all of those considerations for leaders sections, and just look at them aside from everything else. And it was such great advice because it really allowed me to reflect on, again, it's kind of like, what's your point? Does it add value? and what are you trying to share with your audience? It was a hugely reflective process for me. And so I think it changed me. It gave me more confidence. Like, okay, this book can make a difference. This book, you know, it can make a difference in somebody's life by just being vulnerable, by sharing, and by being open and really taking the time to pull those key lessons.
I love that. It's such a reflective and introspective experience, like going through that process. So I appreciate you kind of opining on that a little bit. I'm curious, since publishing, have there been any opportunities that have happened that might not have happened if you had not published the book? Has there been anything that really kind of came your way or maybe evolved in a way you hadn't expected because you put yourself out there and you put the book out into the world?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's things from a personal side, a professional side, some really cool opportunities side. I think when you put a book out there, one, people know who you are, which, is good and bad. There's not, people aren't always nice on social media, it turns out. But also the good side of that is I got to connect with people that I never would have been able to connect with. And these were soldiers on the ground that I had supported. These were children of these soldiers that I had supported who said things, that they wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for, what I had done that day or other A-10 pilots had done. So there was that aspect of really kind of connecting with some people. But I also think from some really cool sides. I mean, from a speaking side, it's opened up tremendous opportunities. After I published my book, I've had my biggest speaking year ever in terms of the number of gigs booked. So I think, it just, whether it's the marketing or the connection, it's all of the above. I just think it creates additional opportunities for you. I think
Yeah.
people learn a little bit more about who you are and what you have to say and the value that you can bring. And so I think that's one thing that was really, it's been really neat to see. I love the personal letters that people send, this chapter, this one thing that you said, how it made a difference. I think that's what I love the most.
That's amazing. Yeah, that again, we're circling back time and time again
Yeah.
to the human connections, right? I think that's
Yes.
so
Yes.
important to keep in mind. And as someone who I think many people would look to as someone who has that ability to embrace risk, embrace uncertainty, what are practices that you incorporate within your day-to-day life? You mentioned a couple of those with breathing techniques, with kind of the fingers and the toes. What do you rely on to steady yourself in uncertain or chaotic scenarios?
Yeah. The second I start feeling like that sense of like nervousness, fear, doubt, worry, it's a reminder for me to go back and put in the work. From a
Mm,
speaking perspective, it means more rehearsal. It means, kind of getting back into the whole rehearsal process. Um, when I'm nervous about having a conversation with my teenager about a really tough topic, it's the same thing, right?
yeah.
It's go back and kind of put in the work, go back to some of those key things that I learned early in my career. For me, it's preparation, which is the research, the study side. It's practice of
Mm,
actually doing the thing, putting in the work. Um, I'm a big believer in visualization. And then also planning for contingencies, because there's some part of me when I feel that fear, I'm worried about
mm,
something. It's probably the what ifs, like,
right.
what if this doesn't go right? Okay, well, let me actually take the time to think through what if this doesn't go right? What if this tough question gets asked? Because then I can really, once I think through those things, for me, I'm like, okay, all right, nothing I can do about it. If it happens, though, I feel more ready to face that uncertainty.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel so uncertain because I've thought through it. So for me, that's the key piece. That's kind of like on the front end of what I'm going to do. And then on the back end, anytime I do something hard, anything in life, actually, my husband was a fighter pilot too, so we're
Right.
very good about going back and doing a debrief after just about everything we do. We can have a party at our house and we'll kind of do a quick debrief after it.
Sure.
But it's really effective for, leadership life and keynote speaking, is to do that debrief at the end of it, because I think to me, that's where the learning occurs. That's where the failing forward occurs. So knowing that I'm going to do that, knowing that during the execution phase, things may not go as planned. I will likely make a mistake somewhere. So then knowing that I'm going to learn from it, right? It's going to happen. So how do I learn from it? And doing the debrief of kind of just walking through it, what went well so that I can repeat it. What didn't go so well, like what mistakes did I make? What are the root causes of those mistakes? And then most importantly, what am I going to do different the next time? That helps me let go of some of the uncertainties, to some of the fear, of just having a process.
Yeah.
That process to me helps. I wouldn't say cure, right? I don't feel fearless. I feel like I can control the fear and do it anyway. I can feel the fear and do it anyway.
I think that's so important to hit on. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that idea of it's not fearlessness, that you yourself feel that fear actively and it's the handling? So can you just tell me a little bit more about that? And have you always felt that way, or is that something that you discovered through your life experiences, your training, the different work that you've done?
It's definitely something that I've learned over time. I mean, I think especially, when I talk about, people always, what advice would you give your younger self? Well, it would be to like give yourself some grace, because things aren't going to go as planned. You are going to make mistakes. You're going to fail. It is all about what you do in the face of those failures, in the face of rejection, right?
Yeah.
And so the nerves over time, I've just learned how to deal with it better. I don't think they go away. I mean, I guess I get more comfortable because I have a process now. And I've also told myself, like, it's okay to feel fear. Like, it is okay to feel that. And when I feel it, it's just like, it's a reminder to me, like, if I didn't feel little nerves every time before I got on stage, like, would I really put in the work? I don't know. I hope I would, but like, it's okay. Right. Like, it's a reminder to
Hmm.
me to just put in the work, be prepared for those moments. And I think sometimes that fear, like if you can just tell yourself, like, look, I'm nervous because I'm really excited to make a difference for these people. Like, I
Right.
really, like, if I take the pressure off me and know that this is for the audience, this is for them. I am here to share a story. And it's in benefit of the audience. So just relax, it goes back to be in the moment. It's okay to feel that fear, that doubt, but be in the moment, just relax and share the story. That's why they brought you, to
Right.
give the keynote. Um, so yeah, I feel like, I don't know that the fear for me ever goes away. It decreases. Like, my
Sure.
process helps me decrease it and deal with it. I don't feel terrified. I
Sure.
feel a little bit nervous. I would feel terrified if I hadn't put in the work, if I hadn't done, the preparation, the practice, the planning for contingencies. Yeah, I probably would be terrified because I know I hadn't put in the work.
Yeah, I think that's so important because there's no quick shortcut. There's no secret sauce. It's very frequently it's just putting the care, effort, time, and grace to yourself into the equation. I think that you're
Yeah.
absolutely right on that. And as you look forward, how do you intend to continue failing forward? How do whether it's in your speaking, your writing, your leading of other people, what's the next chapter of your career, and how do you think about kind of failing forward into that?
I think it's constantly working to push yourself outside your comfort zone. I continue, like, specifically on the keynote. I find, if I'm feeling like in a rut, or when I get coaching, I've done some coaching on the keynote specifically, whether it was vocal coaching or performance mastery coaching. And as you know, the coaches will push you outside your comfort zone. And there are things I just know, I'm like, okay, all right, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try this small section, this one thing. Even though Russell's like, he, talked me through it. Like, I'm still nervous about doing it because it feels like putting myself out there, like it's vulnerable. I'm like,
Right.
okay, I'm gonna do it, and it's probably the most minor thing, but like, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna give it a try. And then I'm like, oh, they laughed, like they really like that, So I think
Yeah.
that's it, right? It's like never getting too comfortable with your keynote, with whatever stage of life you're in. It's like, okay, let's try to up your game and make it that much better. It's, the little things that we do in life, whether it's like from a physical fitness perspective, trying something new, kind of keeping yourself moving forward and pushing yourself a little bit. I think that's always, I don't know, I think that's otherwise, like, how do you get better? How do you continue to grow and learn? It's, whether it's listening to podcasts, reading books, I think all of that helps. Um, for me, it's probably trying to find balance in my life with my work and
Sure.
my kids. And I'm still working on that every day.
Hey, me too, frankly. We'll get there, right? Incremental progress.
Yeah.
That's the key to this. Well, I can't think of a better note to end on. Thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing your story. It was an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Take care.
Take care.